Kia ora koutou, ko te aho, haramai, and welcome to today's virtual Makerspace. I'm going to send you off to do your first small brain teaser activity, and I'll be back again soon. Here is your STEAM challenge activity. We've set up 16 toothpicks to make 2 squares. Your challenge is to move 3 toothpicks to make 3 squares. We'll give you a little bit of time to think about that, or press pause. Now here is your solution. First move the top toothpick from the middle square and place it like this. Then move the bottom toothpick from that middle square and move it like this. I think you can see where the next move is. Move the last remaining toothpick in the middle and place it here, and you have 3 squares. Well done. Well, welcome back. If you joined us last week, we were making dough to make a dough volcano. Today we're making more like a bread dough, and we're going to look at the power of yeast and sugar. So we're going to need flour, sugar, a little bit of salt, a cup of warm water, and a packet of dried yeast. So the first thing we're going to do is we need a cup of warm water. We're going to add that to a bowl, and then we're going to add our packet of dry yeast and just let that start to activate so it wakes up the yeast. And I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so it's been a couple of minutes now and our yeast has woken up. So we're going to put 3 cups of flour, and it's just plain flour, into our bowl. I'm going to add a touch of salt. Just give it a small mix around. And then we're going to add our yeast mixture. Now this will feel a lot different than our dough did last week. Turn that out onto the bench. I'm just going to knead it together. Okay, so there is our dough. I'm going to cut that into 4 portions. There we go. All right, now this is going to be our control portion. I'm going to give that a bit more of a knead. And this is the portion that we're not going to add any sugar to. Right, so we're going to need to keep an eye on which dough is which. I'm very lucky I have these separated containers, but you might just have 4 containers that you can put these in. Just take a little bit of oil and grease the bottom of each. Okay, so our first dough is going to go into this one. I'm not going to mark that one. Okay, so I've made these little tags. We're going to add half a tablespoon of sugar to our next portion, 1 tablespoon of sugar to the portion after that, and then 1.5 tablespoons of sugar to the last portion. Okay, so I've got our measuring spoons here. So we need to add half a tablespoon of sugar to this mixture here. I'm not going to add any water because this is quite wet already. So for the half tablespoon, which is 15 ml, I need half a tablespoon. So I'm going to use the 1 teaspoon, which is 5 ml. Let's put this in the center. And the half teaspoon, which is 2.5 ml, which will give us 7.5 ml, which is half a tablespoon. Okay, so that's the half a tablespoon of sugar, and that goes into our appropriately marked container. All right, our next sample. So this is going to have 1 tablespoon of sugar. Okay, so that's our dough with 1 tablespoon of sugar. Goes into our appropriate compartment so we know which one it is. Okay, so now it's time to incorporate 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. So I'm going to make this as wide as I possibly can. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to incorporate the 1 tablespoon and then I'm going to do the half tablespoon after that. Okay, there we are. So I'll put that in that container there. So now that our samples are ready, we're going to cover them all with cling wrap. And we are going to leave them in a sunny, it depends what time of day you're doing your experiments, but in a sunny or a warm place. So hot water cabinet, inside in a sunny spot, or just anywhere that's warm. Okay, and what I want you to do is to keep an eye on these, maybe every 10 minutes. Okay, and we'll take some screenshots of these after every 10 minutes for the next 40 minutes, and then we'll come back. So we've got our doughs again. We've actually given them at least an hour in actual fact, and they've been quite impressive and interesting in what has happened to them. So what we're going to do now, I hope you can see what's happened here. So what you'll see from some of these doughs, if I take the plastic off, you'll see these doughs here. When the yeast starts to eat the sugar, there's a process of fermentation, but it's actually turning the sugar into alcohol. And you'll see that it's also creating those bubbles that we can see. And once we take these doughs out, I'm going to give them a little bit of a knead. They will actually go away. But certainly the doughs that have more sugar in them, this is 1 and this is 1.5, have created more of that fermentation has happened, and more of those bubbles have occurred from the carbon dioxide that's been produced from the fermentation process. And if you compare that to our control dough, which has no sugar in it, it's actually quite firm and there's not a lot of bubbles in that one. That's more of our traditional bread dough, and this one has still created quite a few bubbles, and this was our dough with half a tablespoon of sugar in it. So what we're actually going to do now is that can be the end of our experiment, because you have seen what has happened in the fermentation process, but I'm actually going to cook these now. So I'm going to start. I've actually marked 2 baking trays. I've lined them with baking paper, and I've marked on them what amount of sugar is in them. Okay, so first thing we're going to do though is we're going to give our dough a knead. You might, depending on which dough we use, and this is the one without any sugar, this actually doesn't need any flour. But what we're going to do is we're going to prove this dough. So we're going to leave it to lie again. We're just going to make it into a round ball. Just going to put some nice little lines in this one. There we go. And I'm going to put it on the baking tray next to the marking that says 0. Then we're going to cover all these with our Glad wrap. I think these pieces should be large enough. And then we're going to, as we call, prove our little buns for at least 15 to 20 minutes. So we're just going to put them back in the sun and then we'll be back. Okay, so we might have done what is called over-proving our little bread buns, but or dough buns, but here they are. This is the one with 0. This is the one with half. This is 1, and this is 1.5. If you smell them, it's unmistakable that that smell from that fermentation process. And I would have to say that in particular that 1.5 tablespoons of sugar for this size was probably too much. It definitely has lost all its shape and it's not looking great at all. But we're going to cook these and we're going to see what happens. So here are our buns, fresh from the oven. You can open them and you'll see they're actually really nice and light and fluffy inside. And by all means, you can try them. And that was the half. So this one was 1.5. This went the most brown of all of them, followed by number 1. And then the half, that was least brown, and one with no sugar had really no colouring on it at all. Well, I dare say we might have overproved the buns when we had already shaped them, but either which way, have a try of them, see if you like them. I think we saw what we were looking for, and that was the reaction between the yeast eating the sugar to produce alcohol and fermentation and produce that carbon dioxide. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for joining me. Ka kite.